Okay. You're not useless. I don't like you saying that. Do you remember how to put your headphones on?
Making sure I had them on right.
Now, though, oh yeah, we got a little different setup, so don't get confused about where we are and what we're doing here.
Nice.
I wanted to get more and more. I know and there's not even any. I feel like we should have some coffee or something.
Oh, that'd be good. Like
or donuts.
A branded mug.
we need to get
Pastor and
the preacher and the pawnbroker. No, that's good. Okay, next week I'll have some branded stuff. I wanted to get more, and so I said to you, I want to get a little more edgy with stuff. It's funny because one of the things that people, you've asked me many times, have I gotten feedback? And I say, well, yeah, I get some people to talk to me about it and what we're doing and give input and feedback. One of the things I've heard is, I really like it when you guys don't necessarily like agree.
Yeah.
It's not just it's not an echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
It's not us saying, oh yeah, I think the same way. And it's a little tricky because we're both Gen X. I'm Gen X. You're Gen X, right? You always say you're so much younger than me.
I'm very much younger than you.
You're still in my generation. So we're both Gen X, and we're both
raised Christian homes.
Yep.
Intact families.
Took a little different diversion with me in the business world and you in the ministerial world.
Yeah.
But we have similar opinions and thoughts, and so a lot of times it's tough to really nail down where we differ. People want to hear, just, and that's one of the things I think that I've missed in recent years, and I feel like it's coming back. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Is I've missed varying opinions being given and received without people blowing up.
Yeah.
Right? Say, hey, listen, here's what I think, and here's the reason why I think it. And instead of just shouting each other down or saying, that's a dumb idea, or why would you think that? Actually saying, okay, that's interesting. Why do you think that?
Right.
And what we learn a lot of times is it's because the way you were raised or your background, whatever, your education, even the path that you took in your profession changes the way you think. So, but we do have a lot of similar opinions. But back to where I was starting was talking about topics that are not necessarily warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
That people get a little bit bristled and uptight about.
Yeah.
And so I said to you, when we were thinking about what to talk about today, I said nothing is non-binary. Which is actually a contradiction in terms, but nothing is non-binary. Nothing is actually binary. That's a binary term. So nothing.
Everything is binary.
Everything is binary. Okay, so you have nothing or you have something. That's binary. But this whole idea of the gray area, maybe exploring a little bit about where we've seen that dilute good morals or good judgment or even just good living.
Yeah.
Like all the gray area. And I sense and I see that that's starting to fade a little bit. The gray is starting to fade and black and white is beginning to become a little bit more prominent. Sorry,
I think people are willing to, it used to be this kind of go along to get along.
Yeah.
More so, I think, than now. Maybe politics has changed that a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Because I think politics were more kind of in the trenches, willing to take a punch, whereas 30 years ago it was kind of a go along to get along. They'd have you'd have a vote in Congress and it wouldn't go your way, but then you'd congratulate the other side.
Yeah.
You don't see that anymore very much. You kind of see the fussing and the back and forth. But I think why it doesn't necessarily happen in an interpersonal way, like a true discussion of ideas, is because we have accepted that everybody has their own truth. And you have your truth, I have my truth.
Sorry, I'm going to write that down. True and false. That's another one that's kind of
And who
Whenever
am
it
I
gets
to
all
say
these-
that your truth is wrong? You know,
Yeah.
it might have pushed you on your truth. There's no universal morality. There's no universal truths that we live under. It's just your perception of truth and my perception of truth, which is, I mean, in my opinion, a very dangerous area.
I think it's just dumb. I mean, I'll just,
It's
yeah,
dumb.
yeah, dumb. The 2 + 2 = 5 thing.
Yeah.
That's a real thing, by the
Yeah.
way, which is, to me, they make it sound really smart.
Yeah.
But you can sound smart and be as dumb as a rock. And I'm just my opinion. Sorry.
Yeah.
One of the things that Robert warned about was, hey, we definitely don't want to step on our toes and get ahead of ourselves and say silly things that, well, I'm putting words in your mouth now. Say things that are not thoughtful. And I agree. I don't want to be.
That we haven't thought through.
Exactly. So here's what I'll say. It came to a head. To me, the whole non-binary thing came to a head, and this whole area, this whole real exposure of all these gray areas that we have injected into culture and society, into every aspect of life, really, religion as well. It kind of came to a head with the whole, I think, gender issues.
Yeah.
The gender issues, to me, it's because it's the one bastion of, like, it seemed to be so logical that there were men and there were women. And then one day people start telling us, oh, no, that's not the way it is. Mm. And I think that's when people started to scratch their heads and say, well, wait, what? What? I mean, I don't know if and that's been, I don't even know how long this has been. 5-10 years at most.
Yeah, most.
Some people think it's always been, but that's not the reality. We didn't grow up with men saying I'm a woman, or a woman saying I'm a man. We knew that there were men that like to dress like women.
Yeah, well, you remember the old show MASH?
Of course.
And
Klinger.
Klinger, yeah. He was the guy who always dressed up as one, but it was just seen as,
He did it to make him think that he was crazy, so they was trying to get out of the service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody understood that what he was trying to do was to make people think he was crazy.
Yeah.
Because people who would do that of their own accord are crazy.
Well, be careful with your words, Robert.
Well, it's true what happened. I mean, it's true what happened with homosexuality. It's true what has happened with transgenderism. These are psychologists and others get together and they determine what is a diagnosable disease and what is not a diagnosable disease. And they write the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual.
The DSM.
And so they say, okay, back in the 40s and 50s, homosexuality was in there, transgenderism was in there.
Sure.
And these would all be coded by, this is where, sometimes you can get into conspiracy theory stuff. And I mean, and I get that and understand it, but it is certainly a marriage between the American Psychological Association and insurance companies and what they want to cover and other things. Because have you ever gone to the doctor and you give them your insurance and then 3 or 4 weeks later you come back and the insurance didn't cover it and you call the doctor's office and they say, oh, that was coded wrong? Because every disease has a code. 567.325.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Well, that's exactly what the DSM was. It was a means in order to.
But it changed significantly in the past. So I remember as a teenager, I was in a friend's house. Her mom was a psychology student. She'd gone back to school. She was a psychology student. She had the DSM, DSM 3R or something like that, or something. It was the third version revised. And I remember in there was homosexuality was something that was treatable. It was a treatable mental disorder.
Yeah.
And this was when I was a teenager. So this would have been in the 90s.
Yeah.
Or the late 80s, early 90s. And so I think just since then, something changed.
Yeah.
Either our understanding changed to be closer to reality, or we changed what we, not necessarily thought, but at least what we practiced and said that veered from reality. And I would argue that a lot of these things, and I have a few things here as far as the gray area that we've kind of shoved in there between black and white. We've taken things and we've gone away from reality into what you said, our own truth, because now it can be our own truth. And I think that's probably at the foundation of it is it can be anything I want it to be.
Yeah. Well, in that situation, the APA votes and says, we don't think this is a disease anymore. Okay, let's take it out. So it's not a disease anymore.
And so the DSM, that's what they do?
Yeah.
The American Psychological Association or Psychiatric Association.
Psychological. Yeah.
One of them.
APA.
They vote on it. And
they vote.
Yeah.
They decide, okay, this is no longer a diagnosable disease. We just take that part out.
Yeah.
That's what they've done with that and other, gender dysphoria. I think it's probably still in there.
Right.
But certainly not in the way in which it's affirmed in much of the culture. And then it gives you the treatment plans for those things. So, instance, for gender dysphoria, so much of the debate now is over medical intervention at a young age. We've got to get these kids because they're going to harm themselves if we don't do these things. Well, why? That's one of the most expensive surgeries there is.
Not only that, but you're on pharmaceutical drugs for the rest of your life.
And it
is.
It's a lot of money.
And so you think, okay, so what brought us to that point though, where we could say, and why is it important to me? And so it's not just important to me because I don't want children to be mutilated and put on pharmaceuticals the rest of their life. It's not just that. It's also, I think, it's the fact that I think it's important to keep the distinction that there's men and there's women. And the reason why is because I think a rejection of that is a rejection of creation.
Yeah.
Right? A rejection of this binary reality that the Bible talks about. Right? And so I think, and I don't like the idea of people rejecting science and biology and saying we're going to do our own thing because internally I think or feel something different, which means I'm going to then reflect that externally now. I'm going to change my physiology to reflect what I think or feel.
Well, right. And I think it's under the guise of compassion. We're going to have compassion on these people. We have to realize it is not compassionate, number one, because we know studies that have followed people for years, it doesn't change their mental. And most of them have additional mental challenges that they're working through. But to say there is not a binary male, female, absolves of any kind of moral absolutes. Everything is kind of nebulous. Everything is difficult to grasp. And again, you can have your truth and I can have my truth and we can kind of go along to get along. But that crumbles culture. Mm-hmm. It crumbles culture. It crumbles society. It crumbles families. Yeah. All those things which are bedrocks, which give stability for the long-term health of a culture, long-term prosperity of a culture, are being pulled. And it's interesting. You mentioned creation earlier. I remember back the early Ken Ham with Answers in Genesis. Mm-hmm. He would use an overhead projector with slides that he would put on it, and he talked about how a divergence away from Genesis begins to crumble the foundations of our culture around us. And we're seeing really what I would say it was his. Back in the 80s, his prophetic voice that was speaking to us of what culture is doing.
People would say that's an exaggeration, and I would echo what you said, even though I'm supposed to be pushing back against things you say. So
we're supposed to not agree here.
How could I have some conflict here? I'll figure it out. I would echo that because I think a rejection of the Creator means that I am held to no standard. And obviously, if the creation story says male and female, He created them. Male and female. It says it many times. Yeah. And obviously in mankind, male and female. And so a rejection of that, or to say that that's no longer true, that is not true. That's the truth we used to understand, but it's not true. Rejects the fact that there is a creator. If there's no creator, then I'm not subject to any higher power than me.
Except yourself. Yeah.
Except to me and what God. I think. Yep, exactly. Exactly. And so I think that is important that we and maybe even lead into some other things, that the whole binary nature of things. I mean, where else do you see in Scripture? You said right and wrong earlier, and I was thinking, even that, what's right and what's wrong. I remember watching And I didn't like the second one as much as What is a Woman? The What is a Woman thing Matt Walsh did, I thought it was pretty good, actually, because it basically takes, and I didn't like the second one. Am I racist? I thought it was actually kind of, I didn't like his premise. I didn't like the way he approached people. I thought he was very unfair, and I know Matt won't watch this podcast, so it doesn't really matter what he thinks of me, but yeah, I didn't like it. I thought it was actually a little bit just poorly done. But the first one, he would approach people and he would ask real serious questions. And at one point, he's talking to a Harvard professor, and he's a professor of, it's not feminine studies, but it's something similar. And he says, well, I just want to get to the truth. And when he says that, Matt says, I would just want to get to the truth. And the professor kind of recoils and says, whoa, now you start using words like that, and we're going to have to end this conversation. He was really offended by the word truth. And I thought that was really enlightening to me, because that kind of, when you say truth, you're aiming a gun at that gray area, and you're saying there is no gray. There's truth and there's falsehood. Yeah. There's one or the other. And people, when you did that, was an attack on this guy. I mean, it was an attack on what he believed, what he thought. Well, believed. That's even another word that, I guess you can believe anything you want. But I thought it was really interesting, his reaction to that, the word truth. He acted like he'd been assaulted by the word truth.
Yeah, I saw that clip, and it was a genuine reaction from him.
It was.
It wasn't like it was kind of put on for the moment or whatever. He was genuinely assaulted, offended by this idea that there was some sense of truth in the matter of discussion. And some of those things are really eye-opening to me, because there are people who genuinely believe wrongly held things. And the reason why I can say they're wrong are because because the Bible is truth.
Right.
And so I'm not the arbiter of truth. I don't determine what is true.
Thank
God
goodness.
determines what is true.
Thank goodness you are not the arbiter of truth. I'm glad.
And so that's where our starting point has to be. But when you don't have that starting point, then truth does become offensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's reason, and so I don't know when it started, but I really have begun, maybe it's just the things that I've been aware of lately, and I think it really does have something to do with the political rhetoric over the last year or two, where people have started to tear down some of these gray areas. And I'm hoping that, and maybe even injecting more truth and saying, okay, there is something. There's this Make America Healthy Again was one thing that I've been really paying attention to. RFK, the fact that this longtime Democrat would come over to the Republican Party, and you're like, wait, what just happened there? Something happened, but his focus has been, hey, we've been lied to. His focus has been, it is now, we've been lied to for for decades now about what's good and healthy for us, for our children, and for us moving forward. And we've been absolutely lied to, and our food is poison. There's poison in the way we fertilize, and pesticides and all this. There's stuff everywhere that's making us sick. Yeah. And I think people are finally, I think it was this last political cycle that allowed people to start saying, enough people that had enough clout started saying things that made other people say, well, maybe there is something here that we need to kind of, I don't want to get away from the gray area thing, but we need to focus in on and say, okay, maybe there's something right here or something wrong here. Maybe it is a lie. Maybe we've been told the wrong things or believed the wrong things. I don't know if you saw any of that in this last political cycle. And I wouldn't say, truth doesn't come from one place other than Scripture, right? I believe that. And I don't think it comes from one political party, because I've had some real issues with both political parties for a very long time. And that's the other thing I was going to say is, as all the, I'm sorry, and I'll let you take over here, but that's one thing that's interesting to me, that as everything else has become very gray and loose in morality and the things that I wrote down are things in love and marriage, childhood versus adulthood, and we can talk about some of these things, life and death. As I've seen those things become a little bit grayer and grayer in my adulthood, in my adult life. I think this binary nature of politics has become stronger and stronger. Like there's one side saying, I'm right and you're wrong. Not only I'm right and you're wrong, but I'm good and you're evil. Or no, I'm good and you're evil. Like there has been, you haven't seen that in politics. It's been really binary in politics. But I don't know that there's a whole lot of truth that has been residing on one side or the other. It's just people wanting, and I guess the reason for that is because it's profitable for there to be this battle, this battle as far as that's concerned with the morality and other things. And I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, and you just have to jump in, grab me, pull me over and say, I have no idea what you just said. It sounds like a debate. I have no idea what you just said, but I have some thoughts.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of thoughts there. I think on your thinking about the political sphere, like I remember years ago, Jesse Ventura, if you remember, I think he ran for governor of Minnesota.
Minnesota. You're right. Yeah, and he was liberal. I don't think he ran on the Democrat platform. He might have, but I actually think he ran as an independent. I'm not sure. You might be right,
but it was something along those lines because he made the comment and he said, go to the Republican convention and then go to the Democrat convention. And you see the same advertisers, the same sponsors, the same everything in both political parties.
Yeah.
And I think that is what has bred. And again, I'm not even one of these that say I'll get all the money out of politics and everything else and have government funded elections and whatever. I don't agree with that either. But I do think there is a sense that money has funded some things just to make some people wealthy. Look at members of Congress when they start and when they get out.
You're really trying to make me angry.
On $180,000, $200,000 salary a year, how do you become a millionaire multi times over by the time you're done?
Yeah.
And they all do it. So we can, you got one side pointing toward the other. And I think finally what's happening is people are waking up and saying, something is wrong here.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
And I think more of that needs to happen. Something is wrong.
Yeah.
What I've been told is a lie.
Yeah. And
it's not just someone's relative truth. That was a lie.
Yeah. Well, I think even the RFK thing, I'm actually taking a class on I'm trying to improve my health and my things. So I'm doing a class, and I was on a Zoom call last night with the guys who are leading it, and both physical therapists, and they would say we would go into a house with someone who's a diabetic, and we were supposed to do physical therapy with them, and yet on their counter were all the sugary drinks, cereals, all these other things, and like, what was our 45 minutes ever going to do to help this person?
Yep.
And so we had to pull ourselves out and start something new that we felt like was actually going to make a difference in people's lives. And I think RFK, he's got some great, like I saw his video, and again, I want to keep on topic here too.
Sure.
I saw his video when he announced his run for the presidency.
Yeah.
And it was actually really, really well done. And he showed what America used to look like when high schools were healthy and we were pushing people to exercise, and there was this kind of national, kind of test of benchmarks and things. And I can say, yes, we need to encourage that. God created our bodies, and we ought to try to keep them healthy for the work that He's called us to do. But RFK is also, as far as I know, and I haven't dived deep into his position, but he's also very pro-abortion, from what I understand. And so you have someone who holds a position of, human health, but also has a disregard for life in the womb, or a seeming disregard. Again, I don't want to paint him because I haven't done a deep dive into his position to genuinely understand, where he stands. But I do understand he's
on social issues. I think
the social issues. So again, what I'm getting at there is you can respect a person for some things that they bring to the table and treat them in a human way, while also not agreeing with everything.
Yep.
And you can still walk along at least a distance with them. Like, I can agree with them. We need to be healthier. We need to get pesticides out of, our food supply and manage that in a better way. I can't walk with him on the abortion issue.
But that's the whole thing with, and that's why I think it's so important to go ahead.
But I'm also not going to say he's an evil person.
Well, no, and that's why I think it's so important to say there's such a thing as objective truth, because it doesn't matter where it originates from. If it's truth, even if it's someone who is misguided in some things, if they speak something that's true, you can say, okay, well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true, and that's something that we've been lied to about, but that's the truth, and it doesn't need to come from not everything out of their mouth has to be truth for what they just said to be truth. Yeah.
Well, I think
because people will tell you, my kids especially tell you, half the stuff I say is questionable at best,
but it's right.
It's right in my house.
I think it was Francis Schaeffer who said,
you might have misquoted that, and you have to correct it next time.
So I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm somewhat that all truth is God's truth. I'm sure someone said it before him.
Yeah.
But then Nancy Piercy, one of his students, wrote a book called Total Truth, which again expands on that point of if things are true, then it is from the Lord, the things that are true. And the scripture talks about Satan being the father of lies. And so that's a pretty binary choice, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
God is true. Satan is a liar.
Yep.
And so if he's the father of lies and he's promoting the lies, he's the one that's promoting the gray areas that pull people away from truth.
It's interesting. I remember I don't know when it was, but someone talked about it doing a red letter study, and I had never heard of it. This was decades ago, but a red letter study of the Bible, literally because people have these perceptions of who Jesus was and what he said and what he taught, and then there's the reality.
Yeah.
And if you want to see binary exclamations or statements, go to Scripture, get a red letter Bible, and read nothing but the red letters, just the words of Jesus. And so people think they have some concept of who Jesus was and what he said, but a lot of times, and I'm saying people that are not necessarily scholars, right, that think that they know what Christianity is, they think they know what the Bible says.
But those scholars in there too.
Well, and then you read just the red letters, read the red letters, and you'll realize that, oh wow, there's he was very black and white. And when I say black and white, and that's the other thing too, even saying the words black and white, people think, they think black people and white people. I'm sorry, don't let me put my foot in my mouth here, but like, wait, you're saying black is bad and white is good. And the truth is I'm not white and none of us are black. And, and so that that kind of label, like I'm a white person. I'm not white. There's nothing, I'm not white. That light is kind of white, but so we tend to mislabel things and then they get associated with some kind of bad. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going there, but I'll come back to where I was. Is that Jesus was very specific about certain things. Heaven and hell. The heaven and hell. I mean, he talked a lot about hell. It talked a lot about generosity and giving to the poor and doing things for the poor. And so there's a lot of things that he said, and he was very specific about righteousness and sin. And so people think that they have some handle on it, but and I'm back to where I was before. I'm not sure where I just headed with that.
It's sheep and goats. That was a big area that the Lord taught. He's separating sheep from goats. And so there is a sense of righteousness and righteous living. And one of the more scary things that the Lord says is, I'll have those at the end of the time that said, didn't we cast out demons in your name? Didn't we give this cup of cold water in your name? Didn't we visit the sick? And he said, depart from me, you work of iniquity, for I never knew you. And so you've got this idea of people who think I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right thing. I'm living for the Lord. And yet what the Lord sees is totally different from what their perception of who they are.
Yeah.
And that's, again, one of the most, it ought to make all of us think very deeply about our walk with the Lord.
Yeah.
If we have a walk with the Lord, it ought to make us think deeply about that, because there is this very clear understanding in Scripture that there is going to be a separation. And so what's the difference between the sheep and the goats? What's the difference between, both can be doing the same good works. Both can be, that's, it's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah.
Both can be casting out demons.
Interesting.
Both can be doing the social gospel.
Yeah.
And yet the Lord looks at one and says, welcome. And to the other, he says, go away. And because there is this very clear understanding, I would say from the overall thrust of Scripture, that the way that we tell if we're sheep or if we're goat is, where our affections lies, the reason that we're doing these things. Where is the posture of our heart, towards the Lord.
Maybe it's the reason why there was that recoil with the word truth too, was because, and we've talked about this before, but Pilate says, what is truth? And he was looking at truth, right? Truth was standing in front of him. And he said, what is truth? And it's the sad moment where you realize that, Pilate doesn't even see it standing in front of him. And so maybe that's the difference in sheep and goats. A sheep knows the truth. They know the person of the truth. All right. So there's a few things that love and marriage was one of those things that I think, and I said to you before we started recording, was it our generation? Was it our parents' generation that kind of dropped the ball? Was it the church? Was it the American church that dropped the ball in allowing so much gray area? I mean, with love and marriage, with this idea that in love, and we've talked about young marriage before, and all we talked a little bit about dating and marriage, but you think about this. I mean, it never used to be the case that there was this go and date all you want and have fun, and then at some point in time settle down with somebody and even living with each other. That's this gray area of, wait, what do you? Is that marriage? No, it's not. We're not married. We're just living together.
Trying it out.
So you're doing everything except for having children, and some people do have children when they're living together. But so you're acting married, looking married. Everything kind of demonstrates that you're acting like you're married, but you're not. So it's just without the commitment, without the ring, and so that became a real norm, and I think in probably our young adult life. Maybe it was before that. And then even on the other end, being separated but not divorced, being separated and now you're dating, but you're not really divorced, your divorce isn't final. And so even the concept of being married, one man, one woman being committed to each other for the rest of their life became very, very gray.
Open marriages.
Yeah. Polyamory. Have you ever heard that term, polyamory? Yeah. It just means debauchery is basically what it means. It means orgy. It means anything I want, whenever I want it, and I can be in love with a bunch of different people all at the same time. And you think, okay, that obviously we dropped the ball there, societally even. I mean, because I'm pretty sure that most truth-telling psychologists would tell you that there's not a whole lot of mental stability and emotional stability in those kinds of things, like there isn't a good, healthy marriage, right?
No.
You want to touch that one? You don't want to mess with that one.
Well, no. I mean, I don't mind messing with it. I mean, it's not the biblical design. It's not what we see from the earliest portions of Genesis. It's a cultural construct to normally make a man, happy with his perversion. And it's not for any other reason than that in my estimation.
What do you think? I mean, go ahead.
I mean, you see multiple wives in the Bible and concubines. I mean, you see all that, and so somebody can say, "Oh, it's in the Bible."
Well, it's justified because it's in the Bible.
Yeah, and we have to see Scripture reveals God to us progressively. We don't know as much about God if you're reading straight through the Bible in Genesis, as you find out by the time you get to Revelation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so God progressively reveals himself through his word to us.
Yeah, it's funny because he calls Abraham and he says, "Here, I want to take you from here to there, and I want to make a great nation of you.
Yeah,
I'll be your God. You'll serve me, and that's it. That's pretty much." And then he didn't explain.
He doesn't, and he never tells him to take Hagar.
Right.
You know, even though that would have been culturally okay, and even when he does go to Hagar, God says, "Nope, not this child. This isn't the one that I've promised you. This one will come from Sarah."
Yeah.
You know, and so I think one we have to reconcile when we try to pull from the Old Testament or other areas, say, well, this was happening in the Bible. They had multiple wives and whatever. And again, hopefully there's not that many people who listen who want multiple wives. But the reason some of that was permitted was because of God's progressive revelation. He had not fully revealed himself yet.
Have you ever noticed people don't have multiple husbands?
Yeah, that's what I say. It's for a man's perversion.
Why is that? If men and women are the same and just whatever, why do you never see women know better? Probably, I mean, first of all, but you never see multiple husbands. No. In what culture is there multiple husbands? I'm just pointing out a fact and wondering why.
Yeah.
If you think that that one is that makes any good sense, and what I'm telling you is that I think men are just too stupid to realize that it doesn't make any good sense, and maybe women know better.
I think some of it is in the goals too. I mean, you see
it's true.
Some of a woman can only have so many children. A man can
and a patriarchal. People say, well, patriarchal societies too. It's
multiple kids.
Yeah. You know. What about adult? So when I went through these real quick, and I first came across the word, and it was one of my employees that said it to me one time. No, it was on a coffee mug. It was on a coffee mug. I saw something about adulting, and I said,
"Let me vomit."
I know, and I thought, wait, is that a verb? When did adult become a verb? What? That's a noun. An adult is a noun, and you just put "ing" at the end and made it a verb. And I had her explain it to me. And by the way, she was an adult. She should have been acting and thinking of herself as an adult. But she was talking about adulting, and what it means is doing things that an adult would do. Yeah. And so anyway, one of these blurred gray areas is the difference between a child and an adult. And I think it's interesting that the word teenager, I think that's a creation of the 20th century, the word teenager, or even the concept of adolescence.
Adolescence,
was 20th century.
Yeah.
Sure. And so there was expectations earlier in our, development as a country, societies, that when you grew to the point of usually childbearing age, in all honesty, that was probably when things started to change as far as what responsibilities and the way the world looked at you, or the world around you looked at you. When you became to childbearing age, you became an adult, and you made adult decisions and you did adult things. You weren't adulting. But that great. Have you noticed that? Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned about childbearing age, and that we were having a conversation around Thanksgiving with my mother-in-law, and her father was 21, and her mother was 14 when they got married.
Wow.
When they got married, and
that would have some real problems in today's world.
That was seen as completely normal.
Yeah, interesting.
And it's actually 7 years between my mother-in-law and my father-in-law.
Right.
And we've rearranged what it means to be a person, a younger person, and that.
You're not recommending people get married at 14.
No,
I'm just messing with you.
No,
trying to keep you out of trouble.
And again, I don't want to. I know there are real perverse challenges in the world, and so you don't ever want to normalize those kind of things. But we also have to look at the long arc of history, and there were some things were different, and not necessarily always in a bad way. And our way, with our present way of thinking, is not always the best way. there's got to be some respect for our forefathers
Yep.
who did some pretty extraordinary things with the limitations that they had and the lack of technology. But in terms of adolescence, that time span, whereas I think when I was in high school or growing up, you would think of adolescence until you were 18, and then you were kind of seeing, you're on your own. And I even had some mixed emotions about that, and that might be maybe we can debate that. But
we know that we have some different opinions here.
I was reading when Jacob got married, he was 40.
Yep. Yeah.
Still in his parents' house.
Yeah.
His mother telling him what to cook.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting that a lot of the men were older before Isaac. Yeah. I think Isaac was also, if I'm not mistaken, he was in his 30s, 37 or something like that, I want to say. I'll have to go back and look at it. But he was into his 30s when Abraham's servant went and found Rebekah and brought her back. And Rebekah was young. And so that was, and I don't know I'm not sure where you were headed with that.
Well, I'm just saying we think in our culture, like I would think for my sons, it's good for you to get out of the house at 18 and get on your own and live your own life and get your apartment and do. But is that the best thing?
Yes, because I don't want them in my house anymore.
Well, the converse is the stereotypical 25-year-old in the basement living off his parents. I don't think that's right either.
So that's the difference, I think.
But there is. Yeah. Is there a place that is grace-filled and truth-filled, that is,
and I think that's where that gray area.
I'm productive, I'm producing, I'm still part of my parents' family, I'm okay with that. I don't feel like I need to go out and chart my own course. Is that, I think that's a very acceptable path that aligns with biblical. And again, I get you. Like I want my kids to build their own family in time to come. But I think we have sometimes recoiled against the 25, 30-year-old in the basement being lazy to, now that you're 18, you need to get out and be on your own.
So that's the distinction, I think. And back to a child versus an adult does not necessarily mean when you become an adult, you need to get out of my house.
Yeah.
I think when you get married, that's the one thing that you see in the Bible is usually when they get married, they would separate from their father and mother and have their own. And even though if they lived in the same clan, if they were around each other, had the same kind of, if they shared livestock or space, they still had their own household once they were married. But that I would agree with you. I think child versus an adult doesn't mean I was a child, now I'm an adult and I need to get out of my parents' house.
No.
I need to be functioning as an adult, take adult responsibilities, do adult work. I am an adult. I am master of my own ship or whatever. I need to start taking those responsibilities as an adult. And I think that's where we fall short. I think that's the 25-year-old who plays video games in his parents' basement. That's the stereotypical,
If he's playing video games in his parents' basement, he's going to play them in his own apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a young lady too. And
I have some thoughts about grown men playing video games. If you spend more time playing video games as a young man than you do reading the Bible or reading let's just say reading a good book, reading good books, right? Something that actually produces, and they say, oh, well, video games, there's a lot of careers now that video games prepare you for. And and I get that, but maybe those aren't the careers that we need to be doing. Maybe we need to be, learning some other stuff. But back to the adult and child thing. I think we allow childhood to just seep into this, that adolescence, and then never know when someone's okay. You're responsible for that. That's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. You can ask me for help as your father. My 19-year-old son, my 21-year-old son, they know something happens to their car breaks down. Guess what? They're going to call me.
Yeah.
But it's my responsibility now. It's their responsibility, and I'm willing to help.
And it's, again, I think it's also that taking a young man, a young lady, and I think Titus 2 speaks to this pretty clearly. Mm-hmm. Younger men and older men, younger women, older women working together from what we would term as adolescence and helping them to build into adulthood in a way which is productive and good and effective, versus, again, this, hey, you're on your own, or, I'm going to take care of you. You can stay in my basement as long as you want. Mommy will do your clothes. Daddy will pay your bills.
You're not allowed to say mommy and daddy anymore. Sorry. And that's the thing I think is, I just lost my train of thought. Of course I did. But no, I think it's important that, that there's rites of passage. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things. Well, here's what I think we do. I think we have all these dumb little things, and I'll call them dumb little things that replace rites of passage. I just graduated from the 3rd grade. I graduated from the 4th grade. I graduated from the 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. I graduated from and so what is graduation now? It just means you went from one grade to the other. Okay. No, graduation means I'm done with my formal education, with my primary education. I'm done. I graduate after the 12th grade. That was a rite of passage that some people now diminish because we had a 6th grade, 8th grade, whatever, all these other things. And I'm not saying I am. I don't like them. I think there should be, because what I think it does is it waters down the real rite of passage. I'm done with my primary education. I may move on to something else, but now I know that I've crossed over this. I've stepped over the line. And I think that's one of the things too with when you talk about this gray area is because where's the lines? Where's the line when you stop being a child and became an adult? Whether that's 18, and we do a poor job of actually treating 18-year-olds like adults, or it's when you are of childbearing age, or even that 18 is arbitrary, by the way. It's cultural, it's arbitrary, it's unique to the last several decades, really. But
well, it was one of the Kendrick brothers movies. Maybe it was Fireproof. I don't remember, but they had a group of guys that were around, and they kind of around talking to one another. And on the one of the guys said, "Hey, when did you know you were a man?"
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the response was, "When my dad told me I was a man."
Yeah,
and I think
rites of passage. Yeah.
So I do think that's something to explore more. We can. You and I, we have spent a lot of time talking about cultural issues and things, but I also think we're going to talk about it.
We'll do a podcast on rites of passage.
We have to bring some solutions to the table. And I think particularly for young men, and again, it's not to discount the young ladies, because I do think there are some things that our young ladies need to grasp a hold of and learn. And it's not just kind of, it is, God has poured out his Spirit on all flesh. Joel tells us that. Peter reiterates that. There's plans for both men and women in the kingdom. We can talk about that and debate some of those issues. But I do think for young men, there does need to be a sense of kind of a blessing to move into his own. And what does Scripture tell us? Scripture says, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife. It doesn't say anything about the wife leaving her father and mother.
Because it probably comes more naturally.
It comes more natural for her to cleave to her husband.
It comes naturally for a woman to cleave to her son, who she's supposed to let go of.
But it also says that there should continue to be a connection between the son and the parents.
Mm-hmm.
Until that point of you're a man, you're starting a family, you have responsibilities. Doesn't mean that you're not physically a man, or you can't be a man if you're not married. God has plans for singleness. But I think there is something about this leaving father and mother in order to cleave to your wife. And I think what happens in adolescence is you learn to cleave to other things besides your wife.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's a good point. Work and leisure. The gray area between work and leisure. I think that's one of the things I was going to say. We got a little bit of time left, but that's one of the things I think we've done a really bad job of clearly. And I mean, obviously paradigms are paradigms, but I think our modern paradigm here is to bring leisure into work and work into leisure, and really be really bad at both.
Yeah.
We're poor workers, and we're not good at resting. When I say leisure, I'm not talking about, goofing off and playing video games. Well, which is great. And that's a good thing to do with your family. That's fine. That is leisurely activity. But rest, just kind of being at rest. And so, back to the smartphone thing. I think smartphones are one of the things that have made this really difficult. I know for employers it is. For employers, knowing that I'm expecting my employee to work, to be focused on the task at hand while I'm paying them. And if they are on their phone or device while they are supposed to be doing a task that I'm paying you to be on your phone. Think about that.
Yeah.
I'm paying you to look at your phone. I'm paying you to scroll Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever you're on.
Yeah.
I'm literally paying for that time for you. And so and as an employer, that's a real, and thank goodness, most of my employees are really good about this.
That's good.
I haven't had to really kind of bring down any kind of hammer or anything, but they realize, hey, I'm at work. I'm supposed to be productive. But then it just bleeds the whole way to the other side, which is when I'm at home, I'm doing work things and I'm not with my family or resting or really getting any. And not to mention the fact that when I'm truly supposed to be resting, I've got something dinging and buzzing next to me on my nightstand. Yeah. That's craziness. Yeah. I'm sorry. So this is the guy now who is, I don't know how many months removed from my smartphone. I don't know, several months. But people, anybody who knows anything about sleep studies will tell you that's a terrible, having light in your room is not good, but having something buzzing and beeping and dinging and doing all kinds of things next to you on your nightstand, horrible, especially with the screen up. Yeah. Thoughts about work and leisure in that gray area?
I'm not good at it, separating those things, really, because I will say pastorally, so much of what I do is communication, communication with people in the congregation, communication from the pulpit, and I'm tethered to a screen so often. So when I'm studying, all my books now are pretty much electronic books. I do have a library at home, but I don't use those books very often because I can go sit at a coffee shop or at church or wherever, and I can study and I can have everything that I need.
It's good.
It's very convenient, but it's with me wherever I go. This is with me wherever I go. My phone number's on my business cards that people pick up. And, so work becomes everything. At home, I'll just do this real quick. I'll just taking care of this. Mm-hmm. I just need to send this one email, and my wife picks up on it much better than I do. Hey, you're not present with us. And it's something I frankly have to work at because, maybe I'll be transparent. You kind of have this performance mentality. You want to do the tasks that are necessary. Yeah. You want to have an affirmation, and that's not the best motivation maybe, but I think it's maybe inherent in most of us. But I do believe setting clear boundaries. That's one of the things that I'm seeing. I do see in my life, and I'm trying to do better at that. I see it in my kids' life who have smartphones and things, that it's constantly with them. And there's times where we just have to say, hey, we're cutting everything off, we're putting it all away. Yeah. Which was, hey, my phone broke right before Thanksgiving.
You're still using it though.
I know.
You said you were going to get a flip phone like the cool kids.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that it's funny because over the Thanksgiving holiday, which we just had, I came back to work on Monday morning and I relished in this. I had not looked at my email since I left the office on Wednesday.
That's great.
I hadn't looked at my personal or work email.
Good for you.
And I tell you what, I didn't miss it at all.
Did anybody comment on it? Like anybody who's trying to get in touch with you?
So here's the thing is, and I would say that you're in a unique situation because pastors, I think, are perceived like doctors, that you're always on call. Yeah. Like that you always have to be on call. You're always a pastor. And I'm a business owner. And so none of my employees were at work for that 4 days. So, we did for several hours on Saturday. One of the shops was open, but they don't need to call them either. No one needed me or said, "Where in the world are you?" And there was really nothing that blew up, And that's the thing is, I had my phone in my pocket, or at least somewhere. If someone called, I'd see that there was a voicemail or they called me. So people that really, really, really needed to get a hold of me could.
Yeah.
And I think more and more, I would say, we need to ask the question: are you at rest? And then ask, is your phone on you?
Yeah.
Are you resting? Are you having leisure time? Is your phone on you? And what I would say is usually if the answer to that is, yeah, my phone's here in my pocket just in case. Well, then you're not true. Your mind's not truly at rest. You're not truly escaping. And then people would say, well, I'm just having a conversation with this hypothetical person. They would say, well, I wouldn't be at rest if I didn't have my phone on, because then I'd be worried about what if someone has to get a hold of me and they can't get a hold of me. I'm thinking, then you need to let go, because something's wrong there.
That's what you have to step back from. I mean, we came up in the time when we know what life was like before smartphones existed. Yeah. And so I remember traveling from Tennessee to Maryland with no phone, no GPS, nothing. But it's like now, I mean, I've traveled that road hundreds, if not 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And I'll put my GPS up now. And I'm thinking,
because you want to know how long it's going to take to get there.
Yeah, but before, do you know what I would do when I was by myself? I would be calculating in my head, and I literally did that.
Yeah.
I would
mile markers,
hit my the trip meter, and I would calculate. Oh, I've got 8 more hours. I've got 5 more hours. I've got 4 more hours. I don't do any of that anymore.
But I guarantee
a silly phone.
Now that when you're even, I mean, so people would say, well, that's not a rest time. That's when you're traveling. Well, it depends. But I bet you're doing work.
Yeah.
I bet you're doing work while you're on you're making phone calls and doing things that are work related. Yeah. I mean, and maybe that's not bad. Maybe that one trip where you do some work or whatever, maybe every time you drive, you do work. That's okay. But what I'm saying is that what used to be pretty clear distinctions in our young years, or even our parents, which when I left work, I went home and I was with my family or resting at home. That has totally gotten blurred. And I think I would make a judgment and say, I think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think that we need to get a handle on that.
It is. We're in such a different culture. And I don't think at times that young people realize, because they've just grown up in it and it's natural to them, how much of a different culture they exist in. You think of some of the vices and things that are readily available to us that 50 years, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago were never readily accessible to people.
Yeah.
And so now all these things are readily accessible to us with very little work. And so what I would stress to a young man or a young lady who lives in the world today is you must learn to set boundaries.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you do become what we started out this conversation. You become in some nebulous gray area where you begin to justify things that are truly killing you, whether it's food choices or electronic choices or relationship choices. There are things that you begin to justify in a gray area because we become addicted to them, or they console us in some way. And one of the biggest things that I think a young person needs to start out thinking about is, how do I develop discipline and boundaries for my life to keep things in check, to keep this electronics in check, to keep my food choices in check, to keep my exercise choices in check.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of pile on and then wrap it up is, I think that the more you live in that gray area, the less effective you are anywhere. I think it's just, and that's the thing that I see if I let too much bleed over or just live in this kind of the in between, is that I'm not effective. I'm not productive, and I'm not, my goal in life has always been, when I do something, do it with excellence. Yeah. And I'm never going to do it with excellence when I'm living in that gray area. So you don't give yourself any time to stretch either into areas that are new for you. That's a good point.
When they're consumed by other things that are just time stealers.
Great.
Good.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'll see if this is a different A little different music there. Yeah, the different outro. My son was listening to the other day. I thought it was pretty cool. So we'll talk more next time.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I could sit here and listen to it for a little while.
Yeah.
But thanks.
Thank you.